A major theme in Pillars is leadership. And leadership always involves people. One of the most important traits and skills that we can have is leading people to change. A very practical way to talk about leadership is getting people to behave differently. If people behave differently than they are, then you can grow forward in your ministry and their development. And so leadership involves people and leading people to change. But that's far more complicated and far more difficult than it sounds. Sometimes we think as leaders that if we simply tell people what to do, then they're going to change. If we give them instructions, then they will change. And we're shocked, especially as we start out in ministry, that people don't always do what we say they should do. People oftentimes don't change because they don't see the need for change. They have a different way of measuring whether something is working or not, and they just don't see the need. Or sometimes people are nervous about doing something new, and they don't want to make a change because of the newness of it and all the fear and anxiety that can be wrapped around doing something they've never done before. Sometimes the people that we are leading to change just simply aren't motivated to change. They're with us and they're there, but they're not motivated to change, and change can simply be overwhelming for them. So then how do you lead people to change when they carry these kinds of obstacles to actually changing? As a leader, especially a young leader, you can get incredibly frustrated. You can speak louder, you can avoid them, or you can just get rid of them. But the Bible teaches ways that we can actually help lead people to change, recognizing where they're at. That inspires them and guides them to be able to change. And it begins by thinking of change as a journey. And the people that you are leading to change have three areas that are most important for them to grow in and for you to target. If you don't target all three areas, you will be far less effective in leading people to change. And the three areas are emotionally, strategically, and situationally. Now, emotionally means that they have to be motivated, they have to be inspired, there has to be an enthusiasm, a joy, an expectation. There's got to be an eagerness about it, and it's got to be real. You can't fake it with them, and you can't position them to fake it. Strategically, that means that it's clear, it's understandable. They understand what the change is and why the change is and what's expected of them in the change. The more unclarity there is, the more doubt and fog there is, the harder it is for that change to take place. We oftentimes think people are passive because they're not changing, and really all they are is confused. So strategically is another area you have to target. And then lastly, situationally, we oftentimes make people changing just based upon their self-control and their ability. But if we will target their situation, put them on a different team, change what situation they're in, that can help facilitate the change. These three areas, emotionally, strategically, situationally, they're illustrated throughout the scriptures. When the nation of Israel is going to go into the promised land, that's going to be a big change. And we know as they walk through the wilderness, there were many times when the Israelites looked back and said, well, if we were only in Egypt, we don't like this change. Now they're going to be going to the promised land, but there are battles that are going to go forward. And so you go, wow, how are we going to help the Israelites to be able to make these changes? Emotionally, what's going to happen? How do we inspire them around entering into the promised land and God's blessing, so that there was a joy, there was an expectation of getting out of the wilderness and into the promised land? Strategically, they were very clear. We're going to line up the musicians, we're going to go into the Jordan, we're going to see God do a supernatural miracle that will assist in the emotional inspiration and the joy that's there. But there was clarity around how they were going to go in, where their first battle would be. People understood what it was going to be. But situationally, there was a change in leadership. Moses was no longer going to be the leader. Now Joshua was going to be the leader. And this younger commander, full of faith, who had been trained under Moses, was taking over. And that brought a different context to the situation. And you see them go forward in that way. You see this with Jesus and the disciples as well. whereas he's getting them to change and to behave in a different way, he targets all three of these areas emotionally, strategically, and situationally that will help them to grow and develop in how they can change. They're in the upper room and they receive the Holy Spirit and they have this power and this joy and this enthusiasm about going forward. He teaches them about having greater authority and doing greater things than he did. Strategically, he gives them very clear mapped out, first Jerusalem, then Judea, then Samaria. And even situationally, there had to be a change. In Acts chapter 7, the disciples were not following the strategic pattern given by the Lord. They were stuck in Jerusalem. And so there was the death of Stephen in Acts chapter 7. And that changed the situation. Now you could lose your life for being a Christian. And immediately the disciples spread it out and they started going into Judea and into the othermost parts of the earth because the situation had changed. So here are these three areas. I want you to focus on your ministry and the people that you lead. Are you targeting them in getting them change by targeting these three areas? And I want to give you just a coaching tip for each area that will help you be effective in leading people to change. For emotional change, here's what becomes very important, and it seems counterintuitive at times. You have to kind of shrink the vision. You have to set more attainable short-term goals that will bring a sense of success and purpose and joy. Imagine you are leading a team to climb Mount Everest, and that is a really arduous task. And you're at the very base of the mountain, and you haven't even started the climb. And if all you do is talk to the team about climbing Mount Everest, some of them are going to say, it's too much. I can't do this for a month or 2 months, how long it takes to climb Mount Everest. But if you capture for them the vision of, let's just get to base camp. It'll take us 4 days. But let's get to base camp. Almost nobody gets to base camp. We could get to base camp. You know what you're doing? You're shrinking the vision. And that is within their capacity to be able to trust God for, to be able to work forward in an act of faith for. Oftentimes as leaders, we actually hurt our ability to lead people to change when we cast too great of a vision that is beyond their ability to reach for. So we have to kind of shrink this vision and we inspire a success in them so that when that step is accomplished, there can be a great celebration. I know that you have a great vision for your ministry, and God has surrounded you with people who you need to lead to a place of change. Break your great vision down into 7 stages of development, and then you begin to create that emotion of faith and joy and the possibility of attaining, getting to base camp. And then you have a strategic change. Strategic change is very important because in order for people to change, they need the right steps. When people don't know what to do you know what they do? Nothing. They are paralyzed because they don't know what to do and they don't want to do something wrong. And many times our people do nothing and we think they're bad when really they're just confused. And it's on us that we have not created strategic change, giving them the right steps for clarity. So my coaching tip to you when it comes to strategic change is this: whatever steps you are giving people to do, it must be actionable. It must be clear. Do these 3 things. And it must be almost memorable. If your people have to take pages and pages of notes in order to know what to do, it's going to be very hard for them to follow through. But if you are leading leaders, you are leading servants and volunteers, and you can say, I just want you to do these 3 things, then possibly they could do it. There was a pastor and he had a church and he wanted a lot more small groups for his church, so he needed small group leaders. He needed to lead some of the members to change their behavior to become small group leaders. And he got up and he spoke to them with emotional change to inspire them, but then he spoke to them strategically. And here's what he said. He said, I just want you to be able to do 3 things. Could you have a heart for people? Could you do that? The second thing, Could you open your house, maybe serve some coffee or tea? Could you do that? And then thirdly, could you lead the people and talk about Jesus? Have a heart for people. Open your house and serve coffee and tea and talk about Jesus. With great simplicity, he gave them specific steps. And there were many people who said, I have a heart for people. I could open my house twice a month and serve some tea. And yes, we could talk about Jesus. And that strategic direction allowed hundreds of people to make a behavior change that otherwise they would not have made. He led them to change. Those strategic actions were memorable. Nobody had to take notes down then. As a leader, leading people to change, you must address them emotionally, but you must address them strategically. And oftentimes I find that this one is where people are most paralyzed. You haven't been clear enough. One of the ways you can know if you are clear, ask the people you are telling something to do to repeat back to you what you have asked them to do. You will know whether or not you have been clear by how they speak to about it clearly or how they make it very confusing in giving it back to you. Emotionally, strategically, and then situationally. You have to change sometimes the situation for people's behaviors to change. Let me give you a simple illustration of this. One time I was at a big conference and there were many people at the conference, and a friend of mine asked me to stand at his table where he had brochures about his ministry. And there was another man next to me who had a table with brochures about his ministry. And I was talking to the man and we began a conversation and we decided we would play a little game. When the conference session ended and all the people walked out, who would get more brochures picked up by the people walking out? And we all had our brochures lined up really nice on both tables. And we just played this game. The conference session ended and the doors opened. And right before the people walked out, I made all the brochures on my table very messy. His were still in a perfect line. And as they walked out, more people, twice as many people, took brochures off of my table than they did his table. All I did was change the situation. You see, people were hesitant to take brochures that were perfectly, wonderfully lined up because they would mess up that perfect alignment. But if they were already messy, people would grab a brochure and they wouldn't think twice about it. I changed the behavior of people by changing the situation. You see this illustrated throughout the Bible many times. And oftentimes, we don't rely on this kind of a change when we are leading people to change. We rely solely on their self-control to be able to change when God is actually asking us to change the situation. There are basically three places that you can bring about change in your ministry that will help people to change. One is you can change the people they work with. They're on this team, they should move to this team. And if they're working with a different group of people, they may be able to thrive. A second area is not the people they work with, but the role they have. I've seen this happen many times where somebody is in one role and they're doing the best they can, but they're not changing and they're not thriving. And all you have to do is move them from one role to another role that better suits their gifts and their skills. And all of a sudden you see them thriving, and change takes place easily because you have changed the situation. You actually haven't changed them. You've just moved them to a place where they're going to thrive and grow. And sometimes you actually literally need to change the place where they're at. When you change the situation, whether you change their team, whether you change their roles, or whether sometimes you realize there's a different place they need to be in, maybe even a different ministry that will cause them to thrive, you are going to lead people to change far more effectively by targeting their emotional change, their strategic change, and their situational change. When people change, there are obstacles to their change. The Bible actually gives us a leadership teaching that fits with this teaching on leadership change. It says this in Isaiah 57:14. Build by removing the obstacle out of the way. When you look at the people that you want to see changed, one of the greatest leadership principles you can apply is, what is the obstacle that is stopping them from changing? What's getting in the way? Oftentimes when we think about growth and development and change, we're always thinking about what we can do, not what we can remove. But here Isaiah says, you want to build? Just remove the obstacle. You know, the truth is that God is a creator. When he breathes life into something, it will flourish, it will grow. It's only when obstacles stop it. God created the oceans and they flourish. When we put all kinds of garbage into the ocean, it stops the ocean from flourishing. If we remove the garbage out of the ocean, then it will flourish. The same thing applies in human nature. You can look at the people that you are leading to change emotionally, strategically, and situationally. You can say, how can I remove the obstacle that is actually stopping the change from taking place? For example, we think people don't change because they're afraid of loss. People are not actually afraid of loss. But when change is oftentimes presented to them, they conjure up in their mind all that they're going to lose. But if you can present change to them in a way of what they're going to gain, you are removing the obstacle of loss from their mind. People don't see the need to change. You know what? Remove that obstacle. Show them the benefit. Show them that short win, that base camp that will inspire them to be able to have that change. People resist change because it's never been done this way before. That's their obstacle. Tell a good story from the past that shows how something new that was done actually was so beneficial. One of the ways that you can remove that obstacle of people going, well, we've never done it this way, bring new people in who have done it that way before. You're changing the situation, but you're actually changing the story. Sometimes people aren't motivated to change. You remove that obstacle by creating a quick win, a success that they can have, and that motivates them to be able to take the long-term journey. Some people are overwhelmed. Change is hard for them, and there's already so much change going on. You remove that obstacle by giving clear, easy first steps where you make change easy. You're going to have to change people. You're going to have to lead them to change. The growth of a ministry, the growth and fulfillment of the vision that God's going to give you, you will not accomplish that on your own. And God will surround you with people. But he's put you in that position of leadership over those people. And so you're on a journey with them to climb to the town of Mount Everest. And to do that, you're going to have to lead them into change. You're going to have to hit them emotionally. Where a short-term win, getting to base camp, excites them and builds their faith. You're going to have to speak to them strategically, to give them clear directions as to how you're going. And sometimes to climb Mount Everest, you have to go down to go up, which is what we have to do in ministry. But that clarity allows movement. You're going to have to address the change situationally, putting them in the right teams to climb Mount Everest. But when you do this, when you follow the model that's in Scripture, and you lead people to change emotionally and strategically and situationally, at that point, what you have done in being a great leader is such a blessing to people because you made it easy for them to change. It is our responsibility to lead people to change. It is not our responsibility simply to tell them to do something and leave them all on their own to make the changes. Make it easy for your people to change, and they will change, and God will bless your leadership with those people.